What's up guys, welcome back to another perspective video in the series here. So we are on our final tool of perspective here. We've covered 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, isometric perspective, and now we're going to cover what has 3 names. So this one can be called multi-dimensional, 5-point perspective, or fisheye perspective. So all of those probably sound like complicated without even seeing this. I'm going to show you really quick, just really quick. I'm going to show you
the grid.
Don't get overwhelmed, but this is a perspective that does have a grid, so we don't have to think about drawing in our horizon points and stuff. So think about that. It makes it a little easier. Here it comes. Are you ready?
The grid.
Okay. So we're seeing it, and I want us to take it in a little bit. Okay, so we have a sphere. So if you guys think about fisheye perspective, what do you always see in movies and pictures? It's everything's kind of distorted, it's curved, right? It's kind of like looking through the reflection of a Christmas ornament. So why do we call this 5-point perspective then? Well, let's look at the sphere. So what we see here is we have lines going in, all converging to the center, right? So that would be, as we know it, as 1-point perspective. So you can imagine there would be a dot right there. That's the first point. Now, if you guys can see, all these curves are coming around and they're all meeting over here. Okay, and the same thing is happening on the other side, all meeting at 1 point. So if I put in my dots there, well, that's 2-point perspective, right? Where you have the 2 dots on each side. Now, if you remember 3-point perspective, where now we're thinking about the height of something disappearing into space. So we have our 3rd point here, but because we're thinking on a sphere, technically we don't just have the top of something, we're also thinking about the bottom of something. So we have our 4th point down there. So if you count them up, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So this is all encompassing. It has 2-point perspective, 1-point perspective, 3-point perspective, all in one, which sounds overwhelming. I understand. It's definitely overwhelming to look at, but remember, we have a grid to work on. So maybe before jumping into this, let's take a little quick review of what 1, 2, and 3-point perspective looks like. So here we have classic 1-point perspective. So we have the 1 vanishing point, our horizon line, and then everything going off into the distance obviously converges to that 1 vanishing point. Everything going up or directly left and right of us is on a straight plane. So usually you can use a ruler or something to kind of keep a nice straight edge here. And this will get you your 1-point perspective. All right, so 2-point perspective, pretty similar, right? We're sticking the 1 vanishing point and we're getting 2, going 1 all the way to the left, all the way to the right. In a traditional picture, you'd actually have your vanishing points off the page, but we know that. So here I'm just drawing a standard building. This is when you're not having that cube facing you just straight on, or you're not looking straight down a street, right? We're looking down 2 streets here. And last 3-point perspective, the one that shows height of an object. So here I'm just lowering down my 2-point perspective through that point up at the top. Same thing here. Remember, these points would technically be off our page in an actual 3-point perspective drawing. But here I'm just drawing a building going up to the sky. And of course, it looks pretty skewed because all my points exist on the page. But here it is. If you guys do want more information on these types of perspective, I'm going to put a link right up to the top there that you can use to go to the perspective playlist and check it out. All right, now that we have our reminder down, let's kind of just look at some examples. So I have some illustrated examples as well as photography. Let's look at the illustrations first. And this is basically what we're going to be getting from something like multi-point perspective. The whole idea is distortion. So it's supposed to make something look weird and kind of funky. No one sees in a fisheye perspective except for, maybe fish. But the idea here is that it's supposed to kind of give a weird kind of bloated dimensional feeling to your picture, and it's supposed to make the viewer who's looking at this kind of feel a little odd. In a normal drawing where you're just trying to show the city, this is something that you would use if you were trying to describe maybe something happened, maybe the character's been drugged or something crazy just happened in the scene, or you're kind of trying to show that this isn't really reality, it could be a dream state, right? So you can see the biggest characteristic of what we're going to get is these curved edges. Some of them will decide if they want a straight in one of the planes. So here it decided that everything that's going up and down would be on a curve, and then everything that's going left to right would be a straight. But so these curves are determined by the points, right? And this is why we have a grid, so we don't have to think about this, but it's essentially the curve coming through from one point to the other point, letting us know. There's no curve here because you can't see the curve coming straight at you. And then of course you have the other curve coming around like that. So like I mentioned in the last one, this is really a type of perspective that is meant to show distress or something's wrong in your picture, right? So here you have kind of like a cityscape, wherever it may be. And you can see that these things are in ruins, right? There's craters in the ground, cracks on the building. They use cross-hatching and sketchiness to kind of add to the rough texture of it. And you can see that you're using straight up 3 types of perspective, right? We already see we got 1, 2, and then of course our 1-point perspective as well. And then these buildings are all, of course, warping to the perspective, just like that. And so this is a more subtle use of it too. Obviously you can see that it's distorted and it's in a fisheye, but they're not going over dramatically crazy with it, but it's getting the point across. So another thing I do want to mention with this, the artist kind of gave us a frame with that circle of the grid they were using. This is something that you can do. You can incorporate the grid within your picture, and then you have this negative space of the corners, which kind of frames the picture. Or you can really expand out the grid, and you can fill every corner. So here we have an interior view with very, very subtle fisheye kind of feeling to it, right? But again, this just kind of gives a different feeling. It's just a basic office setup. There's a desk, a photocopy machine. Really nothing exciting is happening in this picture. But it's made a little more interesting just by the distorted view. So this is another example where you can see that the artist actually drew in their own grid, which you can do as well. You're not stuck to any personal grid structure or anything, but you can see that this is just a standard kind of 2-point perspective city going off into the distance, right? But again, it just adds a little bit of interest, a little more of a dynamic feeling to add that fisheye view to it. So one of the things we get to do as illustrators is we get to kind of break the boundaries. So if you took a camera lens, for example, a standard camera lens at least, is only going to capture so much of the room, right? Like if I were to put a frame here, this might be all that the camera is going to catch. But because we have peripheral vision in our eyes, we do actually catch more of the room than you would on a camera. So this is one of the reasons that you might want to use fisheye or multi-point perspective, is to demonstrate something like this where you can see much more of the room. Obviously, we don't see in this distorted of a vision, but it's kind of a cool way to incorporate everything in. This example right here to the right, this is my example of when you blow up the grid. So you'll notice that it's framed a little bit within the picture, but things are also kind of going off the page over here and over here. So he took the grid that they were using and they just kind of expanded it, right? They made it a little bit bigger so that way it didn't all fit on the page. Kind of like when we put our points and our horizon lines off of our paper. So I added these two just to kind of show how exaggerated you can be too. You know, before I mentioned like fisheye, I think of it as like being inside of an ornament or something like that. When you look through an ornament, you get that really distorted reflection. So here you have the literal interpretation of that. And then also you have this really illustrative, kind of anxious feeling drawing over here, right? Like it looks like he's writing something really important. It could be the last thing he's writing in his life or something like that, right? You know, this is a dramatic moment and it wouldn't have the same effect if it was just standard straight walls. So seeing these in illustrated format is really cool, but sometimes it helps to get a better visual example too of how it might look in the real world, right? So let's take a look at some photography. So here we have a New York City, right? Classic example to go to when you're looking for city examples. And you can see that the distortion here isn't really that big, but obviously you have this building that's warping around this corner like that, which isn't going to naturally happen. Same with this building. You can see this nice warp here. You know, everything's following a very subtle curve, especially things that are closer to the lens. You can really see that light post and this sign bending. And again, this just kind of adds to the interest of the picture. If this was just a standard picture taken on someone's phone, it wouldn't be as interesting, but because it's distorted with this fisheye lens, it kind of just has this interesting quality that draws you a little more into the picture and wonders what's going on. Couple more examples here. Here on the left side, we just kind of have a standard cityscape where the buildings are kind of warping. Kind of reminds me a little bit of an Inception kind of feeling where the buildings started to turn in on themselves. And then over here on the right, we have a picture that's depicted about this person, obviously. But to get us that interesting angle and to kind of frame her in a almost crazy kind of way, you know, we have this distortion that's going on that kind of adds to the picture. It adds to the intensity of her facial features, that cigarette that she has in her mouth. It really adds character to this person that we really have no idea who this is. And of course, you have this used a lot in modern movies and television and stuff. It's something that we can use within our drawings to show reflections as well. So if you have a perspective that's going on in the background, but you wanted to show a reflection and how you would make that look different enough in your picture that people would be able to see, you can add the fisheye perspective onto your picture of the reflection, and it's going to add some variety and difference to your picture. It also places a sense of importance. Without even thinking about it, you know that what's happening in this picture is something wrong. He's being put into a car, but it's not just anyone putting him into a car. He didn't just get arrested for no good reason or whatever the situation might be. We know there's a little bit of a situation to it because we're looking at it in a distorted view. It tells us as a viewer, this isn't right. Down here where we have Morpheus offering Neo the pill, we kind of also get to see this distorted, somewhat fisheye view in the lens of his sunglasses, which again is kind of letting us know that something's happening. There's a little more interest to this moment than just Neo taking a placebo, right? We know something strange, something different, something exciting is about to happen. And it all kind of blends into the distortion of what the camera angle is telling us. So now that we've seen some examples where this is used in real life, in film, in illustration, let's take a look at the grid again and talk a little bit about how we can set this up. So I have two types of grids here. I have this one, which is the one that I'm going to work with. I like it because the curved points actually meet together here at that second point. Another one I provided in the description below would be this grid right here, which has a lot going on, but they did separate it with different colors, so it's kind of okay. You can see that the lines on this one don't meet together, right? They're all kind of curving over here, but it blends itself well to much bigger pictures. So one thing I was talking about when we were looking at the pictures was the fact that I can take this circle and say, this is my frame of my drawing. And then my city or whatever I'm drawing has to live within the parameters of this picture, right? Okay, we can say that, we can do that. But again, you can expand this beyond and have a picture that kind of has just a mild distortion on it. I'm going to grab this, I'm going to make it bigger, decide where I want that point to be. So now if I were to draw a city, it would have this mild distortion going on, and it wouldn't look so dramatic as it might look if we were drawing with a more shrunk down perspective grid. So you have to decide, what do you want? Do you want something that is really distorted, really fisheyed, really gives an uneasy feeling to the picture that you're going to draw? Or do you want something that's a little more mild, just adds a little bit of interest that the average person might not even notice, but once they look at it for a little while, then they'd understand. So today we're just going to practice with this. Nothing really in particular in mind. I want you guys to just grab the grid, whichever one you like best or both, and print them out, put them onto your digital software, whatever you have. And we're just going to practice with them in the background. Let's just mess around. Let's draw a cityscape, maybe an interior, kind of get a feeling for it, see how it feels. Do you like it? Do you not like it? And then we can talk about references for maybe a picture in the future. So like I said, I'm going to use this grid. I'm going to blow it up a little bit. So I really like that idea of the buildings kind of bending over at the top. So I put my perspective nice and low. So if I were to draw it in, this is where my horizon line is, which you can see is pretty much towards the bottom of the page. And then of course I have my two perspective points going off the page right now, but it doesn't matter because the grids are already giving me that line. However, I do have my center perspective point right there. You guys don't have to draw that in, but I was just drawing that in to make it clear where those points are on my picture. I'm going to lower down the opacity of the grid here just a little bit so it doesn't distract from my line work. And now we're just going to have fun. So I'm just going to go in, I'm just going to sketch something, see what comes out of it. My intention right now is to draw a maybe more 1-point focused kind of cityscape, and we'll see what kind of buildings we get. So just a reminder here, guys, as you're watching, I did provide
the grid
in the description below, so please go ahead and download those and follow along. I know this seems complicated, but it's something that you just kind of jump into and try, and it makes it really easy. So here I'm doing a 1-point centric focused picture with the fisheye view. So I'm just following the curves, right? Like the grid is showing me where to curve my line, and I'm just following along. Only thing you're going to get with this is maybe a little bit of wavy lines, because obviously you can't ruler on a curve unless you have a really nice French curve or something, which in that case, if you do, I would probably grab that as well. But again, I'm just trying to look down this city view and build a quick city around it. Really, I'm not trying to think beautiful or majestic picture here. I'm really just roughly quickly sketching something out just to kind of play around with this grid, show you guys how you can use it. You can see I'm just kind of throwing in some quick windows over here, and for the most part, it really just looks like a 1-point perspective drawing with a little bit of a curve to it. Throw in some windows on that left side just for a little bit of interest. And now I'm just going to kind of sharpen this up a little bit so you guys can see it better. Even when I sharpen this up digitally, my lines came out pretty wiggly. Again, it's just practice. We're going to do something a little tighter next week, but I really want you guys just to grab that
the grid
JPEG below and follow along with me and just give this a shot. Maybe you love it, maybe you don't, but you'll never know unless you try, right? All right. Again, the whole point of this is just to add a little bit of distortion and interest and intrigue to your pictures so that they're not all just the same. Maybe there's something going on. Maybe there's a different story in this picture than just looking down a cityscape. So that's the whole point of what you want to be aiming for when you're doing these pictures. All right, finishing up here, just throwing in some detail on those final windows. Erasing these lines. I think I'm going to outline the door, and then that should be it. All right, so here I'm going to do an interior view. So I zoomed out a bit on the circle, and now I'm just going to start with that back wall. So for interiors, we want to be thinking kind of the reverse of the cityscape kind of picture, where we're thinking of the walls coming at us, not pushing that wall or building away from us kind of view, right? Again, this is just coming all off the top of my head. Really no idea what I'm drawing. Just creating a room here, throwing in a door, thinking about the space, what's in the other room. And then my mind just started going about what can I fill this room up with. And I came up with the couch. So I started putting a couch against the wall. And it was really interesting to kind of try to draw these things in this different perspective. You still think with, you know, the idea of 1-point perspective, the straight lines and stuff like that. But then you have to curve a couple of those lines. Right here, I will say, looking at what I was doing, make sure you are erasing when you don't need those lines anymore, because it gets pretty dang confusing if you're not getting in there. So figuring out this couch in this perspective was no easy task here. But it definitely helps to have that structure in the background helping you out. So it was really easy to kind of fix my mistake, go back in. But again, you guys can kind of see, you know, I can fill this picture with whatever I want. At the end of the day, it's going to give you this weird kind of, is this room really rounded? Is this distorted? What's the deal? Why does everything look so off? Kind of thing. And that's the whole point of it. You know, looking at this room, if someone took a picture of this room, boring. It's a couch, it's a window and a TV and a door. Like, there's nothing exciting about that. There's no storytelling here. But all of a sudden, throw in those rounded walls, add in some interest there with the TV, kind of having some crazy stuff going on. What's going on in the other room? You know, you can add all this stuff to it. And like, even just kind of these looming rounded lights coming from the ceiling, it just all adds to this eerie kind of perspective going on. So just enforce my perspective a little bit more and have a little more lines to play with that curve. I went in and threw in the floorboards. Gonna throw in a couple in the other room there. And this picture is done. I'm just gonna frame it off a little bit, just like the illustrations that we looked at. So grab this circle and I'm gonna put a nice blue background around it. And there you go. Nice and framed, distorted room. So let's talk about what we're gonna see next week. So for next week, what we're going to do is we're going to grab a reference picture. Here is mine. And we're just going to take that reference picture and turn it into a fisheye perspective or multi-point perspective, whatever you guys like best of the title there. What you want to do is you want to find a picture that is normal. And what I mean by that is straight up and down walls. It can be 2-point, 1-point, 3-point, whatever the thing is, it's going to work in the multi-dimensional perspective, as long as we use the grid. So grab anything, just make sure it's a normal picture because we're going to be distorting that. So my idea was I really like the idea of a balcony shot. Just the kind of distortion that could come from that view adds an interesting story to me. But that's my perspective. Maybe if you guys wanted to do your room, someone else's room, a cafe, a city, you can even do this on objects if you want. So if you find an object like a car or a robot in some interesting perspective, grab that picture, bring it for next week, and in next week's video, we're going to be using our references to draw our very own multi-dimensional picture. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and please leave your suggestions for future videos in the comments below if you have them. And just for fun, I am going to leave you guys with a blooper reel of me trying to say offering. Enjoy. Down here where we have Morpheus offering, oh my gosh, offering? Down here where we have down here where we have Morpheus, or down here where we have Morpheus, or why do I keep wanting to say offering? Down here where we have Morpheus, damn. The grid.